as I shared with you prior, we wanted to start doing these interviews to really be able to showcase, if that's the way we want to describe it, some of the one, showcase your story and how you got to be where you are from the legal profession in your legal career, but what that story meant getting there, challenges, growth, frustrations, that whole journey, but also today, what are some of the struggles and challenges, areas of opportunity and growth that you're experiencing now or looking to experience? Um, Maybe some of those things you've done to be able to combat some of those challenges, what's worked, what hasn't worked, with the whole goal and initiative here is to share these stories and get these out to our peers in the legal community so we could together help us all grow. And that's the whole purpose of this. And as I explained to you and some of the peers that are also agreeing to do this, that's what we wanted to do. And this is our first shot at it, so we'll see how it goes. We'll An area of growth for me is to test my ability to edit this and produce it. Maybe I'll get some help, but we'll see. I think because we've known each other and because of our relationship, and yes, those that are viewing this and listening to this, Tracy and I are very close, and we have a relationship and had a relationship, and so I know some of this story. I think we're going to deviate a little bit because there's some questions I might dig into a little bit, and maybe get her a little uncomfortable, which that's the purpose of this too. So
Yep.
so let's dig in. If I will start by asking, is there anything that you would like to start with, or any questions that you would like to ask, anything on the top of your mind before we start digging in?
No, I just find it as fortuitous timing because I just had lunch with a friend and we kind of talked a little bit about personal growth, specific to the ops space and stepping into a space of fear because you don't realize what tools you have and the feeling of necessity to have every tool in the toolbox before you step into a new space and arena such as ops. So it's divine intervention.
Well, that's a good point. And if you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes.
Okay.
So why don't we actually start there, basically where you are now,
Sure.
and then kind of work back from there as far as the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So present day, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, which is far from where I started this journey, probably about 1,800 miles. And I am fortunate enough to be the director of ops here at Bader Scott. We have about 150 employees. We're comprised of personal injury and workers' comp. And I get the opportunity to oversee our PI division, our workers' comp division, facilities, and then onboarding, which is the same as our intake as well as reception. So it has been a tremendous journey, not just physically to get here, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually. It has been a journey, but I'm loving it.
Well, that's awesome. And as I've shared with you before, I'm so proud of you and so proud of Charlotte for taking on this. I mean, it was a huge decision, a lot of things to evaluate, a lot of risk to mitigate, and we'll get into some of that too, because I'm sure that's part of the journey and the challenges and struggles. But let's kind of rewind back to present day, getting started in the legal world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you're going back to square one. It started in college, really. I wanted to go to law school. So if you want to really get real, I had a little too much fun in college my freshman year and was told to come home to Arizona. So I had the blessing of being told to transfer so they didn't have to pay out-of-state tuition. So was able to bring the credits, but not the scores, like my grades. So I was able to start at the University of Arizona in Tucson as a sophomore with enough credit hours to be a sophomore, but I had a fresh start on my GPA. So I was able to graduate with honors. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, here I am. I was able to get this great GPA. I graduated with honors. The world's my oyster. I can do anything I want. Let me try taking the LSAT and apply to law school.
Hey, Tracy, were the grades from freshman year, would they have been able to help that GPA, or were they able to hurt that GPA?
Nope. Let's just say my first semester, I went home for Thanksgiving with mono and a broken foot. So
Okay.
I enjoyed my freshman year.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they would have hindered that tremendously. So, but yeah, I took the LSAT. I graduated college with really good grades, and I got an LSAT score that, young and naive and without guidance, I decided, without discussing it with anybody, that it wasn't the score that I wanted. Therefore, I decided to not apply for law school and decided to join the workforce in the legal realm to see, okay, well, I didn't get what I wanted. So let me see if the legal world is really where I should go and endeavor to be. And I joined Phillips and Lyon, which I don't think is in existence anymore back in Phoenix, but I don't know if you remember Phillips and Lyon from back in the day.
No.
Okay. For about 6 months, as a 6 months, give or take, for a period of time, learning PI. And then a sorority sister applied at Phillips and Associates, now Phillips Law Group, and ended up taking the rest of us sorority girls over to Phillips and Associates. And I started there in November of 2001 as a pre-litigation paralegal. Quickly learned that I had the skills of connecting with people, and was provided opportunities to start to step into some supervisory roles, being a lead pre-litigation paralegal, handling the more catastrophic cases, some of the larger cases, and remained at Phillips. I was there until we opened up a San Diego office. So Phillips decided to branch out, opened up Pacific Law Center in San Diego. My then husband and I moved out to San Diego for 2 years, where I got to run the personal injury department of the Pacific Law Center. They then decided to sell that division, and we then relocated back to Phoenix, where we lived. I stayed with Phillips for another year or two, got pregnant with Charlotte, who'll be 15 this month, crazy. And then actually left to be a stay-at-home mom for a period of time. So I stayed home with Charlotte for the first few years. As life would have it, my mom passed away during that time, and subsequently our marriage started to fall apart, and I decided it was time to return to work, and returned to Phillips part-time, then went full-time, and was afforded an opportunity to work in the HR space. I was able to work as an EA, both for Mr. Phillips as well as the COO at the time, Eva, and then ended up working with Tim Tonkin, the now managing attorney over at Phillips, as his litigation paralegal. So I got the chance to start learning litigation and started working with Tim, and was with Tim for a period of time, left for 14 months and went to Fenimore Craig, came back to Phillips, and then was the lead litigation paralegal manager, oversaw the lit department, still served as Tim's EA, And then in July of 2021, was afforded the opportunity to step in as the firm administrator, which was fantastic. And then fast forward February of this year, moved out to Atlanta to be the director of ops here at Bader Scott.
That's quite a journey.
Yes.
Going back to the LSATs and not moving forward with that investigation is something you wanted to do to become a lawyer. Is that, and I know you, so I know really the answer to the question, so I'm kind of gonna change the question a little bit. Has that thought come up over the years of in one way, coulda, woulda, shoulda, or even, hey, maybe it's not too late, it's something I want to go further down? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually took the LSAT a second time. Charlotte was I think when you're a parent, everything is based upon how old your kids are.
Yeah.
That's your timeline of life, right? She must have been middle school, so maybe 6th grade, maybe 5th grade.
Okay.
Yeah, I took the LSATs again and got the same exact score as I got the first time. If you think the universe doesn't show you signs, it does.
Okay.
And did not get into ASU, but got into another law school. And it was a private school, so it was more expensive, obviously, and got some scholarship, but not enough to get over the financial hump because I was a single parent and a homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
And so my, debt to income ratio was not what it was that would afford me the opportunity to get additional funding. So I actually had to decline going to law school.
Okay.
And then that conversation did come up again with my previous employers when I was, looking to move to Atlanta. But I like the administrative space. Are there times where I'm like, gosh, would it have been great? Yeah, there's definitely times, especially when I was doing litigation, working on some of those cases. But to be that person behind the scenes, to be doing not the legal work per se, but some of the heavy lifting as well as the client relations and being a part of the strategic planning in the eventual success of the case was super rewarding. You would just leave very holistically satiated. You'd feel content. And then when there was a positive outcome, what a celebration that was. So my cup was full in that way. I just got to expand my skills and my knowledge in an alternative way, still within the legal space, though.
So am I accurate in saying that initiative may not necessarily be squelched at this point in time, or is there a flicker in there?
There's definitely a flicker. I don't know if it's law school is the thought. I've started to look into additional education, but to be honest, I'm not sure what the right additional education is. I've looked into one of my ALA girlfriends, Amanda Teagues. She did a elevated master's class, but it was specific to law firm administration.
Okay.
So I've looked into that, right? Do I go the MBA route? I know a lot of the ALA colleagues have their MBA. Is that something that I necessarily want to explore and invest the time, money, energy, and blood, sweat, equity? Or are there other facets that I can do smaller chunks to just fill in the holes? So what I have done to help myself try to figure out what that next chapter looks like from an educational perspective is not just tap into my ALA friends, but I did join another organization called the COO Alliance so that I can start to surround myself with those who are doing different things than I am. I'm a firm believer that you surround yourself with those in which you hope to be one day, but also have a diverse group of skills that I can tap into, but also be an equal provider to them of anything that they might need. Building that network, right?
Yep. Yep. Is the COO Alliance? I'm guessing it's not just legal focus. It's all types of verticals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's approximately 200 members, and it's international. Interestingly enough, in the interview process, I learned that there's only, out of all the COOs, only 8% are women. And for me, I'm like, yes, that is fantastic. Because what a great space to continue to build upon and create more openings and have more of that conversation to invite others to step into that space too.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I mean, we're preaching to the choir. We've had so many of these conversations about surrounding it. If, and I've always said, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then we're really, really, really in trouble. So being able to surround your people that are a hell of a lot smarter than me, and which is easy to do, you're just going to grow and just become better and just further get educated. So, you had mentioned, you really enjoy. I don't want to. You really enjoy. You really are fulfilled, I think, with the administration side of the law firm.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit, as far as what kind of jazzes you up about that and excites you about that.
Sure. I like being part of the collaborative effort that goes into finding solutions, identifying what the actual issue is, peeling, I like to say peeling the onion, right? An onion's got many layers. So you've got an issue, but really what is the issue? So start working with a team to peel that back to say, this is actually the granular issue. What is that we do as an organization to overcome that, but mapping it out such that, okay, here's the end destination. This is what will resolve the issue. What incremental steps do we take to get to this place? And who do we bring into that conversation at what strategic times? Like, for example, we're going through a phone system, right? We're looking at morphing and adding on a different vendor. And so having discussions, doing the due diligence surrounding that, but then also mapping out with my facilities and my onboarding team to say, okay, at this stage of the game, we need to bring in our leaders from workers' comp and PI. At this stage of the game, we need to bring in our leadership team. At this stage of the game, these are the communications that we need to have mapped out, all of that, so that at the end is the success. It's like prepping for a marathon, right? You got to start with half a mile first, right? You can't do 6 without doing the half mile. And then who is part of your team so that you get over that half mile to that 5K to that 10K, right? So it's just it's being a part of that strategic alliance, and surrounding yourself with thought leaders. And to the extent that you can be that individual that helps that thought leader overcome maybe a roadblock within their own thought processing, right? Not giving them the answer, but allowing them the space to be like, oh, what if? Because how rewarding is that for them then to be given the safe space to step into, and knowing that even if it isn't the right answer, they're still allowed to think outside the box.
Right.
Yeah.
That's actually a great segue, because I was going to go back and ask you about some of the obstacles and challenges along the way, along the journey. But let's carve into, and it doesn't have to be specifically with this phone system project, but it could be just in general, any type of project. What are the difficulties of navigating a process like that as a law firm administrator?
Sure.
Could be phone systems, could be any type of project.
Sure, countless, right? Your first obstacle is to obtain executive buy-in. Why? What do you believe to be the issue, and why is this an initiative that we should embrace and, in essence, fund, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the money that makes the world go round, and you have to make sure that you are mindfully aware of the presentation of that. here's the challenge, here's what you're losing financially from this investment, this is what the cost is for the new investment, here's what you'll save, and here's what you will financially gain, right? Once that is bought in on and agreed upon, then it's bringing the right people into the conversation at the right time. And
meaning the resources within the firm to get those stakeholders in at the right time during the process.
Exactly, right. But then
meanwhile, not to interrupt you,
no,
but
yeah.
meanwhile, some of these, or if not all of these stakeholders could be every minute they're getting pulled into a meeting to discuss this initiative, it's money essentially coming out of their pocket.
Correct. Right. Absolutely. So it's hitting them with the big ticket item, right? Here is the issue. Here's what we're losing. You know, and you start talking about money in that way, you've got their attention regardless of what direction they're being pulled, because they're like, we don't want that. We want that. So how do we get that? But it's also a lot of times individuals like to be told what to do. It's uncomfortable to be creative at times, unless it's something that's your lane of genius or something that you're comfortable in, right? And so one of the other challenges is inviting the leadership team to not expect me to come up with all the answers. Because let's be honest, I mean, I've only been blessed enough to walk this earth for 43, almost 44 years. I don't have all the answers.
Right.
I don't. And honestly, Mike, I don't want to have all the answers.
Right.
Because that's not living, in my opinion.
Well, we never will. We never will.
Right.
And the more we search, typically, this is going back to the personal growth side of it. And this is my experience, because the more I've searched for answers, the more the deeper I dig my hole, and it's harder to get out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that would be probably the second challenge is, you know, when they come to you looking for the answers, pushing them gently into a place of discomfort such that they then continue to expand.
How do you have a practice or a process that you've learned to be able to incent them and motivate them per se to take on that proactive approach, that creative approach, because and if when they say, okay, I'll do it, how often do you have to be, hey, is this being done?
Great question. The first portion of that is it depends on the person. I can't wear the same hat for each of my team. So if it's one of my team members, it's literally just saying, well, what do you think? And then they're like, oh, okay, cool. This is where I get to start tapping into, and then creating that relationship where they can test it and say, well, what do you think about this? And I can guide them a little bit, but not giving them the full, you know, spoon of cereal, but give them a little bit. And they're like, okay. And then they keep going and they start to understand the creativity, the thought processing. And I have found that their mind, it almost like slowly starts to do this. Because they're given the permission, they're then given the reinforcement, but then they're given more permission, and then they don't need as much permission. Does that make sense? They kind of both. Whereas others, you may have to go in with, maybe it's a bit of storytelling. You know, I remember this one time where I was given this opportunity and this was what I did and this was the outcome. You know, is this something that you might think that you would be comfortable with, or what are your thoughts surrounding that? Have you had an experience like that? It's that coaching, mentoring kind of communication style with them, right? And then there's others, you know, you get the opportunity to be a little bit more direct. Hey, this is what I need you to start doing. This is where you said you want to go professionally. I'm going to help you get here. This is how we will do it. Step one. Oh, okay.
Right. So that's going back to telling people what they want to telling people what they should do.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But then also starting to say, this is what you should do, step one. I want you to think about what the next step is after that. I'll help you get started. You know, you're holding on to a kiddo who's got training wheels, or they're taking the training wheels off for the first time, and you're holding the back of the bike, right? Okay, you got it, you got it, you got it, and you let go, and they don't even realize that you've let go.
Well, that was going to another thought that I had with respect to in these conversations and in these discussions, because there's situations that I've experienced, and we've talked about this, and I know you've experienced about, however the discussion needs to be had with that specific individual, how even after the fact, is there reservations for them to spread their wings, because there's that, oh, I'm being given this opportunity, or I'm being given this directive, and I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid that I'm going to do this and I'm not going to meet that expectation. And how do you continue to massage that person to help them and coach them to get them to where they want to be, where we collectively want them to be? And I'm sure there's some times where you realize that, okay, well, it's just not going to work out, and we have to clip the wings, so to speak.
Yep, absolutely. Twofold. One, in my one-on-ones, when I first started having them, I clearly outlined the fact that I am a firm believer that there is no such thing as a mistake. I expect every single person to make an error. It is qualified as a mistake when it's repeated. Otherwise, it's a learning opportunity. So to the extent, I remember Tim once said, he used stronger words and more colorful words, but it was go mess stuff up. That's the only way you're going to learn, right? And to the extent that I wanted to create that alliance with them and that safe space, it resonated better with others than it did some of the other team, which is fine, but I wanted it to be an equal standard. The other is having them confront their fears, right? What is it that you are afraid of, and what does that look like? And really, is that so bad that you should fear it, or are you just talking about something that's uncomfortable? One of the many opportunities that I've been afforded here at Bader Scott is to start creating a workshop on a quarterly basis, and doing a lesson and a workshop amongst the leadership team, which is about 30 to 40 team members. Talk about uncomfortable. Never having done it before. I was scared out of my mind, but I was like, you know what? If I'm not uncomfortable, I'm not growing, and I am here to grow. And fail or not, fall and scrape my knees amongst people who are my peers, and it's going to be great no matter what. And so allowing them, reminding them of that, right? Like, hey, listen, all of us every day, continuing to step into a place of humility with grace, but something you and I talk about on a consistent basis, but a space of vulnerability, right? Because if you create space of vulnerability, you allow the other person, it's an invitation, I like to say. They can RSVP or not, but it's an invitation to step into that space. They have the right to say no, but I'm hopeful they'll RSVP yes.
That's great. I wanted to, it's a lot of great content right there. Going back to the projects, and I have this one word, creativity, written down. And I had written down before that, proactive versus reactive. You know that I've been in this industry for a very, very long time, and working with law firms, they tend to be more on the reactive side of when the cut just opens up, when the scratch just opens up, and there's a problem, but the problem hasn't hit the level of intolerability yet. It's okay, we'll deal with it when we need to deal with it, and it's not dealt with until it becomes intolerable, and then, okay, now we have to throw everything at it. want to make sure I ask this in the right way, because I've experienced that with most law firms. And I could say most law firms have that mentality where if it's not broke, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
So what have you, and I think you could say you've experienced that same type of situation, those same types of situations. How have you, and how have you been able to potentially change that culture over the years, of going back to how you talked about the challenges of certain projects, getting the right stakeholders in the room at the right time, building that business case, so on and so forth. Talk about some of the ways you've been able to proactively go to the firm and say, hey, listen, we need to do this. This is why we need to do this, so on and so forth. And it's more of a proactive thing versus, hey, we need to get this done because this is broke over here.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. And to be honest, I've had the same experiences as you, in that most places historically are reactive. I am excited about the fact that here at Bader Scott, although we still are somewhat reactive, we are learning that that is not optimal. One of the mantras here is accelerate to excellence, and one of our firm goals is to optimize tech, people, and finance. So the vision and the mindset is there, consolidation is there, the identification of areas of opportunity is there on a consistent basis, but the ownership and leadership team are cognizantly aware of the fact that before you can go the distance, let's make sure that the structure is impenetrable. Then you can build upon it. And I have great respect for that thought processing. And it's exciting to be somewhere. I was explaining to my dad about the organization. My dad, God bless him, late 80s, you're trying to simplify it so that he can digest it. But it's like you're creating a strong skeletal system so that you can then start to build the muscles so that they are then at the optimal strength and physical fitness to go the distance.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I know we're coming up on the hour, so I want to be sensitive of your time, but there's a couple other things I want to hit.
Sure. And I don't have a meeting after this, so if you need to go over, don't worry.
Okay.
I get to spend more time with you.
I appreciate it, and vice versa. You spent the far majority of your career at one place.
Yep.
Yeah, you had a couple little departures, but came back. And this is going back to maybe the whole journey along the process. I mean, investing that amount of time, the firm investing that amount of time in you investing that amount of time in the firm, and then finally realizing that you've been able, because this, I'm speaking from my experience too, because I got a similar story as well, as
Sure.
Making that break and saying, okay, I've invested and done everything I believe and become everything I believe I could become at this place, and now it's time to make that shift. Mm-hmm. And this is going back to really maybe the decision process and making that shift. Just talk about how hard that was, and really, because I know it was, and I've been through it, so I know the difficulties of making that decision, but also really what you kind of learned through that process and how you feel today.
Sure, absolutely. I was scared out of my mind. Being a single parent, there's nothing more terrifying than making a decision to uproot your family and move away from the village that you've created and been blessed enough to have surrounding you for the last, I think I've been in Arizona 25 years minus the short time in San Diego, and move somewhere where you know nobody. Mm-hmm. Your daughter is going to a brand new school. You don't have a house. You don't know how to get from A to B. Where's the grocery store? I mean, just those little things you don't realize. And I was fortunate enough to have loved ones like you and Robin to talk through it with. I talked through it with my sister and my brother-in-law. And really at the end of the day, talked it through with Charlotte. I was really I was really blessed with who it is that I got as a little person. So she's a spectacular individual. But she flew out here to Atlanta with me for my 4th interview with Bader Scott. And the last day that we were here, we drove around for the better part of the day, looking at the different areas around Atlanta, looked at the different schools in the area, and sat down at what's it called? Iron Mill Brewery?
Iron Hill.
And Mom had a beer. Charlotte had some crazy Sprite, and talked it out. It was really scary. We had built a life in Arizona, but we both agreed that this next chapter was going to open doors we knew we couldn't open in Arizona. So if given the opportunity, we decided we would take it and uproot and move to Atlanta, Georgia. And sure enough, we did. I remember standing in our driveway on February 12th, Super Bowl Sunday. My sister-in-law flew in from Seattle, and bless her heart, took all of our luggage, and we had the dogs and she had the cats, and 2 cars drove away from Cave Creek, Arizona on February 12th. And we haven't looked back since, even though there has definitely been some challenges, some opportunities, personally, professionally, missing family and friends. Honestly, I've asked Charlotte several times, Mike, and she has definitively said she would not have made a different decision. And
that's great.
I agree. The opportunities, the people I'm meeting, the organization that I'm working with, it is what I needed to help push myself to the next level and create openings for Charlotte. I mean, I know this isn't about Charlie, but to the extent where all she'd known is volleyball back there, her other passion, which she'd never had a chance to do before, is music.
Yeah.
She's getting a chance to tap into this other side of her. I'm getting an opportunity to work with some amazing people and pave ways for individuals that I never would have had the opportunity to meet had we stayed there.
Yeah, and I think that's important. You said it's not, this isn't about Charlotte, but I think it's important to mention that, because the story in and of itself is it's a special story, because there might be your peers sitting in, or anybody that might see this, sitting in a similar situation where they've lived. I mean, we know there's people out there, no matter what the circumstance, that are sitting in a situation that they have been in for a long time. It's comfortable, it's convenient, it's known, right? But in a sense, they might not be fulfilled. They might have done everything they've wanted to do, become every person, who they wanted to become, but they're looking at this huge jump, this huge chasm, that unknown, that uncertainty, what's going to happen. And this is proof, and you and I have a lot of stories that this is proof that you could go through the process and you could evaluate it and you could mitigate risk. You're not going to mitigate all the risk. You're not going to find out all the answers, right? No. And you might never find out all the answers, but at some point in time, you got to cross that chasm. You have to make that jump. If you truly believe that this is the right direction to go, yes, there's going to be a lot of questions that are unanswered. Yep. There's going to be fear, but there's a point where you need to jump in with both feet and you hit on it and never look back.
Yep.
Now, the whole never look back, that's sometimes tough to do. There's always those wheels turning, and should I have zigged when I should have zagged, and so on and so forth. But then, and I know this about you, when you sit down and reflect on it and really look into where you are and who you are, and in your case, who Charlotte is, knowing that story and knowing who you've become along the journey, it's critically important to focus on that and not really, you can think about that behind you, but don't dwell on it. Move forward and start looking at the opportunity ahead of you and who you might want to become. And I think packaging this whole story together is important because, you know, you had mentioned early on in the journey, you did a lot without any guidance, you know, and now over, especially with this process, this decision, you've had guidance, you've had those mentors, which is critically important. And for somebody sitting there maybe going through this process themselves, I want them to know that they're not alone in this process. There are people that, hey, listen, they might have not walked in your same shoes, but they have a similar story to tell, that maybe you're facing something very similar, that there's this risk, there's this uncertainty, but I know if I move forward, it could be potentially what I want it to be, and it's going to get me out of where I currently am. I think it's very, very important that we touched on that, and hopefully it helps somebody, and I think that's critical.
Absolutely. I think part of the challenge is that a lot of people are uncomfortable stepping into a place of vulnerability because they create the narrative in their head that their story is either negative, or they've made a mistake to get to where they are, or they haven't done something right. So now they're having to do this. Like you said, they zigged versus zagged. But to the extent that this does help somebody realize no mistake is a mistake unless it's repeated, 1. And 2, take the risk. And 3, talk to those who you are fortunate enough to have in your circle, because even if they haven't journeyed through it, they are there to love and support you and be that ally to talk it through. And the verbalization, like I remember sitting with you and Robin, right, at Tailgaters and talking through it. Sometimes verbalizing it is processing it. So even if the other person hasn't gone through it, you verbally walking yourself through it and talking through it is hugely impactful in the process of the decision making.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, well, that's great. And there was another one I had for you, but I know the answer to it because you just hit it again. What's the failure versus a mistake? What's the difference?
A mistake is a repeated occurrence.
Failure, you could fail doing the same thing over and over again.
You could, absolutely, but I think failure is when you forget to get back up again. I think it's only deemed a failure when you forget that you have the ability to wipe your knees and get back up. I don't think that there is failure unless you quit.
Yeah, well, that's because I was going to disagree with you on the mistake and the failure, because I don't, and I encourage the girls and everybody I've talked to, and I've talked to you about this, go out and make mistakes. Like Tim had said, go F stuff up. And I think the more you could classify the falling down as a mistake, as a failure, however you want to classify it. It's critically important to make as many of them, and you're going to make more than you're going to fail more than you succeed. And I think that's important to reiterate on here, because in the basis of the conversation, and especially I think our generation growing up, is there was that constant message of fearing failure. You had to be perfect, right? You can't make mistakes. And you made another great point with respect to, hey, listen, I'm making this choice to go down this path, but I'm afraid that people are going to think I'm going down this path because I screwed up and failed over here. Well, pardon my language, who gives a damn what other people think, first of all? But And that may be the case. That is whatever it is that you believe is guiding you down the road.
Yeah.
That you were supposed to fail at that, and all it is it's like the bumpers in the bowling alley, right? They're course corrections. You were supposed to go down this road, and yes, that destination, that outcome didn't happen the way you wanted it to, or in the time frame that you wanted it to, but it was a course correction to get you back over here.
Yeah.
And this still might not be the right way to go for you over time, but at this point in time, it's the right direction for you because there's a path that we're all going down. Yep. I think it's important for us to talk about that and learn from that. So you had a lot of great points. There was another one I had, and you mentioned tools, and this actually came up just today in an article I read about. It was about organizations in general. I'm not going to pick on law firms, but law firms are this way too. But almost every organization that I'm aware of, and with law firms, just because we know them so well, the tools that we have access to, the technology that we have access to, especially applications, right? Being able to get the most out of those applications. You know, are we using just a small percentage of the actual tool necessary? And there's an article I posted out there that references this, that we collectively as organizations don't use typically the tools that we have access to and at our fingertips to the best ability that we should, or to the full functionality that we should. And I know you've been through that process too. So I think that goes around training and understanding and having those conversations further. So I didn't want to dwell into that, but that was another thing I just wanted to mention, just because, get it out there, because I know people that are sitting in your seat are probably feeling the same way, that, oh yeah, our firm's not using our document management system the way we need to, or Teams the right way we needed to. So the last question I do have for you.
Okay.
And I didn't give you a heads up on this one.
Oh, great.
Tell us something that most people wouldn't know about you.
Oh man. What would most people not know about me? Ooh, that's a tough one. I usually like to use the height joke, but most people who know me know how short I really am. That when I thought about going to law school, I actually wanted to, when I was thinking about going to law school, I wanted to dive into the genetics aspect of the legal world, to understand more about genetics, to utilize that for the betterment of people. Didn't have specific goals and aspirations in it. I just thought legal, and my educational background from undergrad was community health education. So building upon the health education aspect in the legal realm was actually why I wanted to go to law school.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know you actually took the LSATs twice.
Yep, got the same stinking score.
That's well, hey, you're consistent.
Yes, consistent if nothing else.
Okay, well, listen, I really appreciate you doing this, and this was great. This is really I believe that those that have the ability to go through this and listen to it are going to learn and get some tremendous value out of it, for you sharing your vulnerability and being transparent, as I know you always to be. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, Trace. Always.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to continue to expand my vulnerability.
Good deal. I'm going to just hit stop recording.
Okay.
All right.